this a test moment? Yeah, you can just pick it up. Directly into... Ooh, yeah, you're right. Oh, the microphone. Okay, we are going to start the panel about the writing process from writing a book to publishing the book. We have a mix of people here. We have editing, publishing, formatting, bookkeeping. Those are really the primary ones. We have a little bit of marketing if there's time. And I'm going to have everyone do a quick intro. We only have 45 minutes for this, so we're gonna make it snappy but make it informational. So Christa, if you want to start with your intro.
Hello, I am Christa Carmen. I am mainly an author. I write novels, short stories, but I have also done a lot of editing and have shepherded 2 award-nominated anthologies through the whole process. So I'm here to offer my insight into that part of the process as well.
My name is Steve Porter. I'm the owner of Stillwater River Publications, a hybrid-style publisher. We've done about 900 books over the last 15 years. I'm also self-published myself with a few books. And formerly, I ran a bookstore chain of 176 stores where I did the marketing and advertising and promotions. So I guess my role here is to talk mostly about the publishing side, but I think I can handle a little bit of the retail stuff too.
My name is Liz Sauco. I am primarily a fantasy author, writing high fantasy with urban fantasy and science fiction elements. And I'm here to talk about formatting.
Hi, my name is Julia, and I am the CEO of Profit and Equity. I am here to talk about the scariest thing for everybody, which is their money and how to handle it, and answer any questions that people might have about that.
All right, perfect. So I tried to put the questions in order here. We went around, we asked the authors keywords so they can start locking in here with the authors what questions they had for the 5 people that we have on this panel. I'm going to start on the editing side and then kind of go down the line here. So one of the first questions we have is, what is the key to keeping your story cohesive from chapter to chapter, which I know is not completely editing, but developmental would help with that?
Yeah, so if it's okay, I'm going to answer that question, but I'm going to talk kind of a little bit about maybe something in general first. So when I first started writing, I never thought about the editing process. I just thought, like, how do I approach this as the author? You know, what do I want to happen here? You know, am I doing things in a way that I think is going to require the least amount of changes from rough draft to final? And now that I have published 3 novels with a publisher that has a very extensive editing process, now my approach to a question like that, chapters, or really anything, making it cohesive or making it putting it in a place where I think, like I already said, like where it's, you know, I'm focusing on the story in the early drafts, but I'm always keeping that piece of it, like, you know, how is this going to be, you know, down the line? So in the moment, do I want to really focus on like timeline and, you know, chronological order of events here, or do I just need to keep the story flowing? And I think as you progress as a writer, you start to figure out what that balance is for you. I also think that I like to think of it as a collaborative process. So I when I'm writing chapters or when I'm like figuring out more of the mechanics of things and saying, you know, what do I want to, even something like how long do I want my chapters to be, and making these decisions along the way, I used to be a lot more rigid with that. Like, I want it to be this, and the chapters are going to be within this range, and this is going to, and again, to just bring it back, and I know we don't have a ton of time, so I won't talk for too much longer, but to bring it back to like what I do with my editors when I'm working on a novel, I have beta readers and an agent that reads things, and I have a big picture acquiring editor that still works with me on each book, and then I have like a developmental line editor, and then I have a copy editor, and then I have a proofreader, and then I have a sensitivity reader, and then I have a cold reader. So it's a lot of editing. And now that I know that, I don't get so worked up about some of the early stuff. Like I'm like, maybe this chapter stops here later on. Like you got to just find the balance that works for you for figuring out how you're going to manage those things throughout the life cycle of a book.
So yeah, I feel like you touched a little bit on the next question. So maybe I give this to Steve, both of you, all of you, I don't know, whoever feels like it. What advice would you give to a self-published author trying to find a professional editor and publisher for the first time? So let's go on the editing side of this and say from publishing, obviously you can speak on, is that part of what you do? And then with traditional publishing, Christa, when it's included.
Well, sure. I think everybody, even at an event like this, is at a different level. You've got authors here who are looking to self-publish. You have authors here who may be traditionally published. And then there's a whole lot of different places in between where you can end up as a published author. But I really think that the lesson in that question is that don't be an arrogant writer. Understand that your editor might walk in, look at your manuscript and say, hey, wow, this is fantastic, but delete those first 3 chapters. Your story starts on chapter 4. And there's so much ego involved in the writing process that you don't listen to that advice. So number one, it's making sure that the editor you work with does have some background and some experience in the field, knows, maybe get some idea of other books they've worked on, and even, very important, understands your genre, and then trust them. When they tell you to work on characters or work on scenes, or this doesn't work, or this works too well, trust them and go ahead and make those rewrites.
Yeah, and then I'll just really quickly add to that I think the best, I absolutely agree with everything that you said, and I think the best thing that I've ever done as an author, and I know I'm going to say this and people may very well be like, yeah, sure, you probably still have an ego. I truly do not have an ego when it comes to like people editing, and like you heard all the people that I said have to look at my stuff, and I have even anybody, a beta reader, an editor, any step of the process, but like you said, you have to establish the trust relationship. Like, I'm not going to go on Goodreads and look for advice on how to fix, I'm not going to look at some negative reviewer that who knows where they're coming from. But if I know that somebody has my best interests at heart, I am always going to at least look at what they've said. If it's not necessarily something I agree completely with, I'm always going to look at it as like a play. Like if they said, oh, why is this happening here? Maybe you should do this. Maybe I don't want to do what they said the maybe you should do this part is, but if they got stuck on something, I'm always going to pay attention to it. So I just think it's really helpful to just have a collaborative relationship with your editor.
I'm going to loop Liz into this one, even though it's still a little bit of editing. So in terms of the advantages with editing for traditional versus self-publishing, they're worried about the risk of being edited out of your own voice. So at the risk of having the same people answering all the questions, I want to get your perspective too as someone who has a series.
Yeah, so to definitely kind of dovetail off of what Steve and Christa have said, when you're working with a publisher, they want to create a product that will sell. So anything that they are recommending is something they think will make it better to sell. They are not recommending things that they think is going to make the book worse. So that's like because people are really worried about that. They're like, well, what if I don't want it to be that way? Well, okay, you might not want it to be that way, but this industry professional has told you that this advice is going to help your book sell. You have a choice as an author, whether you're going to go to trad, hybrid, or completely indie publishing, how much control you're going to have over that sort of thing. But if you take no one's advice, you can put it out there entirely on your own as an indie publisher. Just keep in mind you are stacking the deck against yourself in some way when you do that. You have to take a look at what is going on in the publishing world if you want to actually sell books. If you just want to throw it out there, it doesn't matter. Like, you can go and you can self-publish on Amazon for free without your book having been looked at by an editor or anything. Do I recommend that? No. But you can. There's no one stopping you. But if you want to actually sell books, then you have to consider that your book is a product that you are putting out there. It's not just your child. You probably don't want to sell your children, but you do want to sell your books. So keep that in mind.
Listen, you never know. I think it really depends. All right, for the different versions of publishing, and then we're going to move on. Steve, the hybrid publishing, self-publishing, traditional publishing, I mean, you're a little biased, but what is best? And I think we can probably tailor this and say based on what they're looking for, what are the advantages and disadvantages, generally?
That's a huge question. I could go probably an hour and a half just trying to answer that. But it really comes down to what your goals are. That's the first question when you sit down. If you want to be a writer, write. Nobody's stopping you. Write anything you want to write. And then when you make it to your deathbed in 100 years, you can throw it all in the fireplace. And that's great. But if you want to be an author, you've now crossed the line, and now you have a responsibility to others other than yourself. And if you're going to be an author and you're going to sit at a table here, sell a book, then the cover's going to be right. The interiors are going to be set. The editing has to be done. And then certain kinds of marketing within your genre have to occur. So when you're picking the publishing path for yourself, well, self-publishing is cheap. You can do it yourself. You can just toss it up on, KDP or elsewhere, and it's published. Hybrid publishing, you pay a fee. You just have to make sure you find a good company to do it. Do not go after those folks. Do not call those people who advertise on cable TV at 2 o'clock in the morning. Do not do it. But there are good companies online. There are good companies locally that you can do that with. That'll cost you fees. They'll set it up for you, but that still doesn't mean you might make it. Now, traditional publishing is fantastic. If you are so lucky, if you're so talented, and those two things kind of go hand in hand with traditional publishing. If you're going to go that route, then you need to study the industry. You need to study the business of being an author. To me, it's like someone trying to open a restaurant because they really like to eat. Hey, I've eaten 3 meals a day my whole life. I know food. Well, I don't care how many books you've read or how much writing you've done, you still don't know the business. And until you master the business of writing and authoring and publishing in books, that's when the traditional contracts and the traditional will come your way. So that's, I know it's kind of a weird answer, but there is a lot to that question.
Yeah. I think that covers the gist given the 45-minute time limit. So my plan was to go to Liz next, but I'm pivoting because you mentioned the business side of publishing. So we're going to come over here to Julia. You were talking to me earlier about what does bookkeeping look like on the author side, and you mentioned something that I did not think about at all, which is a research expense. So can you talk a little bit about, obviously, the write-off side and whatnot, and then those few that I didn't think of, so probably many others are not considering?
Yeah, absolutely. And he mentioned that being an author is being a business. It's not just getting into a business. You're becoming a business. You're creating a product and you're selling it. And you want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success so that the IRS doesn't come calling one day with some really bad news. So you want to protect yourself and you want to make sure that you're writing off the expenses that you can write off. And that is a really key part of it, that you can write off. And one of the big ones that a lot of people miss is they don't set up their home office as a write-off expense, and they don't set up their research as a write-off expense. Being at a book fair would be considered a research expense. Traveling to a certain place that you want to write about to study the geography or the culture or whatever it is you're looking at could be a research expense. Those are all things that could be included in the business of being an author. And if you can write those things off, and you have so many book sales, then you don't have to pay as many taxes on those sales. And that's a big key for a lot of people. And that's what we do. We help authors figure out what are they doing in their business, what can they save money on, and what can they write off so they don't have to pay it all to Uncle Sam.
So you're talking about authors as a business. Can you elaborate a bit on this, not necessarily the steps per se, but what does setting yourself up as a business mean? I know. We have that's not hours, but what can you share?
That's a huge question,
Yeah.
absolutely. But being an author, you want to separate yourself from your private finances. You don't want your house up for grabs if somebody doesn't like what you wrote about, for example. And to do that, you would simply establish what's called an LLC. That's the simplest part of that whole process. The really messy part is when you have to separate the finances, and you want to make sure that you have a separate bank account, you have separate, basically everything for your business side. And that allows you and the IRS and the legal system to see you as a separate entity from your personal life. And that's really key when you want to protect yourself as an entity that's putting a product out there that might be offensive to some people, or might anger some people, or might have some kind of a copyright infringement that you don't know about. You want to protect your assets, and you want to make sure that your business is guarded and your personal assets are guarded by setting up that LLC. It also allows you later on to start building up some clout, if you will, so that you can become a bigger business when you become the next Brandon Sanderson, and you have a lot of money to protect. Now you can set yourself up as a corporation, and that will set you apart from your business even more to protect even more assets.
Yeah, these are things that I would have never thought of, so thank you for that. Back over to Liz now for formatting. So what are some of the programs that you recommend? I know you formatted your own books, and you've done it for some authors,
Yeah.
author friends, author strangers, whoever. You've done it for them as well. So what are the tools that you've come across and really found useful over time?
So I guess to start with that, when we're talking about formatting a book, we're talking about taking your finished manuscript. It has been edited, it has been proofed, it is done. You are not changing words anymore. And you are putting it into the exact shape of the book that you are going to sell, essentially. So you're doing all of the final formatting is what that's called. A lot of people do this in Word, and you can technically do it in Word because Word is a word processor, and it's good at word processing things, theoretically. It does struggle a little bit when it comes to creating certain formats. So usually in book formats, we're talking there's ebooks, there's paperbacks, there's hardcovers, and there's audiobooks, which audiobooks aren't covered in this kind of formatting because that's audio. But the others all have physical formatting to them to some degree. Word, you can definitely format a paperback or a hardcover in Word if you are good with Word and you know what you're doing. Technically, you can do an EPUB, but you're going to struggle a bit if you are unfamiliar with how EPUBs and reflowable text works, basically. So there are programs that can help you with this. The big ones that are usually out there, Vellum came first. Vellum is, however, Mac only, your mileage may vary on that. If you are like me and you would rather die than use Mac, then that's not going to help you in any way. Atticus is another program which is PC and Mac. And there's another one, Lacuna, which is I want to say it's in beta right now, but is probably a little bit more powerful than Atticus. But because it is more powerful, it's going to have a steeper learning curve. Basically, it allows you to do a little bit more as far as your chapter headers, how you want your chapter numbers to look, what you want your scene breaks to look like, and all that jazz. And if you are very good with computers, what I do is I actually will format in Affinity, and the other one is going to be Adobe, is going to be the main industry, because Adobe has, a stranglehold on literally everything. Adobe is going to be your main industry standard, essentially. But Affinity is a free product that can do almost anything that Adobe can do. So I do also recommend Affinity if you would like complete control over what everything looks like and you don't mind figuring out graphics programs.
And then you mentioned something earlier to me that I never thought of, so that goes to show how many books I've written. Different formatting styles by genre.
Yes, so this goes a little bit back to what we were talking about earlier. Every genre is going to have genre conventions, both in the actual writing and in what it's going to look like as a finished product. So different fonts for different books work only based on what genre your book is. If you are writing a horror book, you might choose for chapter headers, for example, to do that really scratchy kind of handwritten, wrote it as they were dying kind of a thing, and that will work for horror. But if you're writing a cozy romance, please do not make that your chapter header font. That will be bad. Instead, pick one that has the little hearts in it or something. You can do a whole bunch of different things with that, but what genre you are writing should help you determine what you want this book to physically look like.
All right, so I offered up the option to ask a few marketing questions if there were time, but I don't want to take away from the actual panelists here, so I'm going to pivot a question that is technically marketing, but I want to ask Steve over there on the publishing side. So you do hybrid publishing, so can you talk a little bit about what, if any, promotional services might be included, press releases or things like that, depending on package and whatnot?
Yeah, sure. Hybrid publishing, by the way, just as a quick definition, is kind of the middle ground between a traditionally published author and a self-published author, where you're essentially you're self-published, but you're buying the services to give yourself a professional cover, professional editing, professional distribution, and professional marketing. So all those things cost money, unfortunately. And so that's what you're paying for. So that's why you want to have some confidence that the company you're working with is above board. In terms of marketing services, it comes down to, again, what your goals are. Some people write and produce books with the intent of just impressing their mom. Others want to be #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list. Depending on what your goal is with that book, which direction you want to take is going to define how much money you may want to invest in your project. And honestly, and I bet if you actually talk to a lot of the authors who are exhibiting here today, they'll tell you it wasn't the money that bothered them the most about publishing, it was the time commitment. How much time do you have to invest? Because a lot of marketing can be done for free. Social media is a big deal, Book Talk and Instagram and all these other platforms are amazing ways to market your book for essentially nothing. But it's the investment of time. How long does it take to learn that? How long does it take to have to invest, an entire Saturday sitting in an event center? And how many of these Saturdays are you willing to invest? And how many evenings do you go out to libraries? And how many weekends do you go to bookstores and do book signings and readings? So sometimes it's that investment, the investment of time, that is just as relevant as the investment of funds. But again, it comes down to what your initial goal is with the book. If your goal is to get to #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list, then you're going to be looking to invest essentially what Random House might invest in you, which is significant. But you don't have to do that. You can do it on the cheap. You can do it inexpensively. But you do have to have a defined goal.
I'm going to piggyback on the social media piece. So I'm realizing that I didn't do an intro. My name is Alyssa Flori. I have a bookstore in Pawtucket, but I also do consulting for authors. So just a quick response on the social media piece. You can absolutely do it for free, and I encourage everyone to do it for free, but again, you have to put in the time to learn it. There are also people a little bit not so shameless self-promo here that can help you with it, which doesn't unfortunately make it free anymore. But there's a question on here about when is too soon to start promoting a book. And from the marketing standpoint, I'm going to answer quickly, but then I want the author standpoint as well. I don't think there is a too soon, because you have to promote yourself as a brand, in a sense. So you would start promoting yourself as an author, that becomes your brand, so that by the time you have a book to promote, you're not saying, hi, I'm user 375 on Instagram, I have no followers, but my book's coming out in 2 months and it's going to be really good and you should probably buy it. Because the you that you're talking to is no one at that point. You didn't build up a following beforehand. I don't know if you would agree with that, but I feel like, yeah.
Yes, I agree. It's kind of tough though, because you can't. It's almost like a catch-22, because you also can't necessarily. I mean, you can, but you can't really come out and say, I'm Christa Carmen, and I'm going to have this book out, and here's my aesthetic, and here's all the things that I'm doing. But you also don't have a product. So my experience with that was that both kind of came naturally. I actually published a short story collection with an indie publisher before I published 3 novels with a more traditional publisher. And so I guess my answer is like it's helpful to kind of do things at the same time, like be writing, be trying to meet those goals, whatever they are, if it's to be traditionally published, be writing, be querying agents, be, doing what you can to get a book out there, and coming to things like this. And I think the biggest thing that I did to make myself have any sort of like presence within the book community was to make myself a presence within the book community and go to things and meet people in my genre and join writing groups and reach out to people that there's a gentleman here, Paul Magnan, that I met him because I saw he had published a story that I read online and I loved, and I saw that he was from Providence. And I just reached out to him and was like, hey, just wanted to tell you I liked your story and you're in my area. And he invited me to be part of his critique group. And that was like my, anything that you can go to where you can meet people is only going to, and I don't mean that in like a use people, like people also know when you're like inserting yourself into things and trying to just be like, hey, be my friend because I have this whole plan of having like a book come out in a year. I just think kind of going about things as organically as possible is really helpful.
Yeah. No, I agree. Before you jump into that, a quick tip in terms of the early, like you're talking about, you started posting, but you were already writing. You can post about the writing. You don't have to call it a book. You can post and say, I'm working on this, I don't know, wouldn't even call it a draft yet, necessarily, and just put yourself out there. Meeting people is marketing.
Yes, and the other good thing for that, and I didn't use this because 12 years ago when I started writing and going to events and stuff, it wasn't really a thing, but I think Substack or a newsletter in general is a really great way to do that, because even if you're not, even if you don't have like a book to come to something like this and sell yet, you can be engaging anybody that you meet. You can pull into your community and try to organically build up those relationships.
Yeah, that was basically what I was going to say, is that like if you're starting writing, there is no really too early point, even if you don't have a product, because you can always talk about what you are doing at the moment. So you can talk about what you're writing, because that is going to help connect you with other people who could end up being your readers, basically.
A lot of these questions on marketing overlap with kind of what we've already covered. We have 11 minutes, which means we can answer one more and then maybe do audience questions if there are any. What I want to cover here, I should probably mention, okay, so these questions are from the authors that are here, which is why I'm referencing the notes so heavily. So everything that we've talked about has been something that other authors are asking, which means, the classic saying, if you've thought of it, someone else has too. This question is about getting more comfortable taking videos of yourself for social media when you're naturally an introvert, which I feel many authors are naturally introverted. So do we want to touch on a couple of marketing strategies that have worked for you as introverts?
I'll just say I always feel cringy putting, like, I don't know. I think the best thing I ever did, I think if you're not actively promoting something, if it's something that you're uncomfortable with, I wouldn't even push yourself to do it, because if you're not comfortable, it's not going to come across as organic, and it's just, whatever you're comfortable with. If it's just I was just having a conversation with some authors about this, like, a still photo is obviously much easier than getting on TikTok and putting together some crazy difficult reel. Even if it's not a photo of you, it's a photo of your desk and your aesthetic, or your, furry four-legged office mate. Like, you can have your own, like, vibe to social media that doesn't make you uncomfortable as an introvert, like we all are. I will say, when I was promoting my last novel that just came out, I know that I'm not good at like I'm good at the bait. I can post on social media and write a Substack and but I'm not good at reels. It's awkward. You feel weird. So I did hire somebody to just kind of help me make some content. That gross, icky word that feels so at odds with being an artist and a writer.
Content
to make
creator?
the content. But it was really reasonable. It was just a small amount a month for a couple months, and she just would be like, my book's set in Newport. She was like, go to the Newport mansions, have fun, take some photos of you holding the book, take some little reels. It doesn't matter if you feel totally goofy. I can edit that. And so that made it doable for me. So meet yourself where you're at, and whatever you can do, try to just fill in the gaps.
I think real quick, you have to have a kind of an honest conversation with yourself about what your marketing personality is. I've done 4 books myself. I've been at over 400 book signings since I started doing this, and mostly that's because I just don't like doing it on social media. And I'm a big advocate of using social media. I'm just not good at it. I know I'm not good at it. I know I force it sometimes. I know I spend too much time on it and get little results. So I do those things that are good for me. Now, some people might say, doing 400 book signings, I'm not going out in public and sitting in a room full of people. It's not happening. That's not my personality. That's great. You can still you don't even have to get on your pajamas in the morning, stay in your basement and work the internet, work it that way. And I can tell you lots of big success stories from independent authors who do that. I published one book, a memoir, for a gentleman. It's a book, I've got it back on my table there in the back corner. It's his memoir about going through a really difficult childhood with child abuse and other issues. He is not going to go out and start talking at an event like this about it. So what he did is he set up one Facebook group, and for 1 year invited people to that group. The day the book came out, he sold 600 copies on the first day to just the people in the Facebook group, without ever doing a book signing, without doing a video, without ever doing anything else. So find what it is that you do and you do well, and do that.
And that's a huge example of leveraging community, too. I mean, you can do something similar without using social media. You could do a newsletter and invite people to subscribe to that, and then at the end of the year, you have those 600 subscribers. I'll add one more thing, and then we'll hand it over again. I think it's very important that if you acknowledge and decide that you're not going to do marketing yourself, and you say, okay, well, let me find someone to help with that, it's important that you click with the person that you add to your team, because you have to take on someone who's not going to say, okay, I understand that you don't like social media, but we're doing it anyways. There's so many different approaches you can take. If you work with someone that is, I don't want to say is okay with that concept, but is okay with not pushing you into the things that you're not comfortable doing, which should be most of them, I just feel like you are more likely to see results that way than pushing it, and again, not having that authenticity come through in the organic side.
The only thing I really have to add that is, once again, genre is going to come into play here. Certain platforms are currently kind of ruled by different genres. So TikTok is currently ruled by romantasy. Can you advertise on there as a sci-fi author? Absolutely. But keep in mind that a lot of the readers who are on TikTok looking for books are romantasy readers. A lot of fantasy readers are on itch.io for some reason. A lot of romance readers are on Facebook. So look for other people in your genre and see what they are doing and see where they are and try to kind of like join those spheres of influence to some degree. It's a rising tides rises all ships situation. You're not in competition with other people in your genre. You are working with people in your genre to promote each other, basically.
All right, this isn't the best format for audience questions, but if anyone has any, I'll repeat it into the mic so that the recording can catch it and we can go from there. Does anyone have anything they'd like to ask any of our wonderful panelists? Yeah, what do you got? Is there a Yelp or similar for editors?
Not that I'm aware of. It's a great question. I think it's another example of like needing to be tapped into your community, because authors talk and they're going to share whether they had a good experience, for better or worse. There's like a whole cancel culture thing that can happen if like somebody's like really most of the time if somebody's really problematic, you're going to find out about it. For somebody that like you don't have a good way of getting an opinion from them about them, I mean, I guess if you find an editor that's advertising online and you can't find anybody else that's worked with them, you should ask an editor, like, give me some of the authors that you've worked with. And if it's nobody, I mean, you know, we want to like be giving somebody a chance if they're up and coming. You don't want to, but you should probably just try to find somebody that a bunch of authors have worked with, again, in your genre, that have experience. And just try to see if there's some feedback that you can get before working with them. It's also tough too, just really quick, sometimes you want to just have a really blatant upfront conversation with an editor about like what your personality style is like what I said earlier about like if I don't have an ego when I'm working with an editor, I don't care how blunt they are with me. I'm like, you can tell me something's terrible, it's the worst thing you've ever read, get it out of there, and it's not going to bother me as long as it's honest. But if you are like newer and you want somebody that's going to be a little gentler with you, you don't want to work with like, I don't know, some cutthroat editor that's going to make you feel this big. So you can just talk to your potential editors as well and see how you feel the relationship is going to go.
There are some sites you can go to, like Readsy is one, for better or for worse, Fiverr, where at the very least there are often reviews for these people on those sites. So I wouldn't say like go to Readsy and only look at Readsy, but you can use it at the very least as like a jumping off point.
Just real quick, there is an organization, and I'm going to get the acronym wrong, so I'm not even going to try, but it's the Society of Professional Writers and Editors. And they also do indexing. So if you're a nonfiction person and you need a lot of indexing done, they're a good organization to go to. I don't remember the acronym. I need to Google it on my phone, which is back on my table. But there are support services out there for that.
There's also, not to like keep focusing on the negative, but there's also a website called Writer Beware for like things that are super problematic that you should be aware of, whether it's agencies, publishing companies, what have you. Sorry? Scams to look out for as a writer.
There are more resources out there than I think any of us even know about. They keep popping up. They keep popping up everywhere, and then there'll be one that has been around for 20 years that you're like, oh, how didn't I know about that? It's research. It's all research. It's constant research. But I think we're at 1 o'clock, so we are going to say thank you so much to our panelists and jump into the next in 15 minutes. So thank you all very much for listening.